What was the biggest personal challenge that you've had to go over?
Realizing that somebody else can do the job just as good as I can if I train them properly. Your fulfillment is your baby, and my fulfillment was my art. Realizing there's people out there who are better than you at the thing you're doing, and you kind of have to go from player to coach, employee to CEO, and it's just a completely different job.
What was the biggest personal challenge that you've faced, or you've had to face, personal obstacle that you've had to go over during this journey?
Probably letting go of, rather giving leeway on fulfillment and realizing that somebody else can do the job just as good as I can if I train them properly. I think anyone that goes from one man to team, you kind of feel like your fulfillment is your baby. And someone like me I have an artist's personality, my fulfillment was my art, and it was a lot to kind of hire on, my first and second writer, and having a team that can share the fulfillment with me. And, right now I kind of just wear the chief editor hat. I treat it like a newspaper, whereas the team kind of puts out the first and second draft, and I have the final say. Like, I can change something, I can change wording, I can, spacing, check everything. I could completely delete something if I want. So I'm very much a chief editor at my business now, but that was a lot. I mean, it's taken almost a year to kind of let my foot off the gas a little bit. Like, I would say it took me at least 6 months to let them put out a final product. I'd say now they're very good, especially with clients who I've been with for, a year. Typically, like, a new client, I'll give more attention to the editing, and an older client who we've had for so long, like, I don't really have to give them much attention. It's more of the ideation process that I'm involved in. But I'd say the biggest challenge is realizing there's people out there who are better than you at the thing you're doing, and you kind of have to go from player to coach, employee to CEO, and it's just a completely different job. I mean, being a CEO is mostly just talking. It's just writing. It's just sending messages and talking, like making decisions. And, that's like a pretty tough transition, especially early on, is realizing like you just make decisions. Sometimes you find yourself like, you don't even realize like that one split second decision was your biggest decision of the month. You just don't even realize how important it is. So putting more effort into decision making and having better processes for decision making rather than daily routines and processes for writing and stuff like that. It's a big transition. It's a tough transition.
Yeah, because at least in my experience, and a lot of what I do now is more of that, just being the CEO, being the director, being the owner, the shareholder, and just you make decisions, you think. Basically, that's your job. You just think things and decide and manage people. Just make sure that everything's running smoothly, attend meetings, decide what to do, plan what to do, and move forward. And I think one major thing that I had to battle with when making that movement, that transition from being the main person doing into going into the business that I have now, Agency Dev, and being that owner, that shareholder, that, CEO, was I don't have that many day-to-day things I need to do. I don't have to send DMs. I don't have to prepare email scripts. I don't have to do this. Like, they're employees, they're people who are hired to do those things. I have to just check off on them, make sure they're good, and move on. And at times, even now, I struggle with, sometimes I'm not completely sure what next to do. And I feel that that's where the tactic days do come in handy. But I'm just curious because it's not something that I've discussed too much with a lot of people, but how do you handle that in your day of knowing what to do and knowing what next you should be doing as the CEO?
I struggle with this too, to be honest. I have a couple of systems that I've put in place for this. There's two things. I think one is the systems. I have my warm app and I have my CEO checklist. My warm app is it helps me. I theme my months and I have my daily to-do list there. So if I really am struggling with something to do, I'll check my CEO checklist, my warm app, and I'll check my KPI sheet / projections, and I'll look at which client can I pay more attention to today if I need to, what have I not done on my CEO checklist, and what's on my warm app, and what's the theme of the month, and I can kind of zoom out. I kind of always want to put the client first, so KPIs is almost always first. I'll open the KPI sheet, I'll look at each client. I have indicators on my KPI sheet, red, orange, green, in terms of where the client's status at for the month. Are they on track for KPIs? Are they not? And I'll know which client needs attention. After that's out of the way, assuming everybody's on track or I've done everything I can, it's the CEO checklist. And if that's done, that's more of a weekly checklist. Then it's the warm app, and the warm app is basically my to-do list. So those are good. And then I also have a mentor, which is like, he helps me kind of get on track, and he'll help me give like a bird's eye view of my business and like what's fucked up, you know? So those are like my two systems that I use.
So the wall app is basically a to-do list, but you mentioned it being mapped out by month themed, or how does that work?
Yeah, so this is a play on the Sam Ovens warm up, and it's basically split up into 5 categories, which is also the 5 categories that I have my SOP library categorized at. So it's five colors: is marketing, sales, onboarding, fulfillment, and retention. So I have those 5 categories are color coded, and my SOP library is also split into those colors and those categories. So for example, November is fulfillment. I had onboarded 4 new clients in November, so all I'm focused on is fulfillment. So November, I'm like heavily on the KPIs, fulfillment, onboarding, stuff like that. Next month might be, sales. So it's going to be red, and it's going to be like, okay, December is sales, or maybe half the month is sales. Sometimes I'll split it up into weeks. And it's like, okay, what SOPs in my sales library can I look at and update? How can I get more sales? How can I do this, that? So I'll typically theme it that way. That's basically just looking at the health of the business. It's like I don't have an unlimited capacity, right? So if I'm at capacity, it's definitely not going to be marketing or sales that month. It's going to be something else. But if I'm not at capacity, I'm like, all right, it's marketing or sales. So I kind of look at it that way. If I'm at capacity, it's probably going to be somewhere retention, fulfillment, or onboarding. And I'll kind of split it up that way based on how many clients I have and if I'm increasing capacity or whatever.
How about the CEO checklist? What does that look like? Is that like daily tasks, routine like things?
Yeah. CEO checklist is like the chief editor hat is on there. So did I edit my client's content? Did I look at the KPIs for my clients? Did I edit our notes section as a team, projects, whatever? Is the media buying good? Did I do sales and marketing? Did I attend all my client calls? Stuff like that. And it's just my weekly checklist, so I know that I hit everything I need to hit. SOPs, whatever.
Because I think my issue usually comes with when I'm done with all the to-do lists, when I'm done with everything on the task list, everything on that week, all the things that I can see. Then usually what I do is I look at our client tracking sheets and things like that of, all right, reports on each agency, where they're doing, how they're performing, and those type of things, cost-wise, profit-wise, revenue-wise, client-wise, and various other things. And just looking at, all right, how do we optimize, how do we fix these things? But after doing that, I then wonder, all right, what next? What else do I do? And yeah, I think that warm up. So that's by Sam Ovens.
Right. It's this old consulting.com warm app. And it's just a 2023 version. Yeah. It's essentially a big calendar. You can find it on YouTube. It's like pretty popular.
So it's basically just going through every system in those various things and how to improve them.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's like it boils down from the whole year's overview to each month to each day.
Right. I'll look into that a bit more. Thank you for that.
Of course.
We have a way that we like to end this podcast by getting the last guest, as well as the audience, to ask a question to the next guest without knowing who that guest will be. So the question for you, from the last guest is, what is your purpose and what do you do to make the world better?
I'll leave it with the Birdhouse mission, and I don't want to butcher it, so I'm going to read it verbatim. The Birdhouse mission, which is essentially my purpose, is, and I have to start with a problem, and I think the problem is that the education system is failing millions of people around the world. And I think to fix that, we have our mission, which is to catalyze world-class education brands, fan their fire, and we help humans learn better. So my purpose is to help humans learn better.
How do you go about doing that? Of course, it's what Birdhouse does, but if you were to summarize that in 1 or 2 sentences of what Birdhouse does to make humans learn better, how would that be?
So I think the way that the Birdhouse is doing it is by only accepting world-class educators and education brands and building them up and growing their impact. And I think the second facet of it, this is more personal, is building a large brand and personal brand and creating content that puts out real cold hard education and puts out different aspects of the system and gives people different lanes that they can take and different paths that they can take and kind of spreading that message. So I think building a brand around it is one, and for the Birdhouse specifically is by catalyzing other brands.
So how do you qualify the educators? How do you make sure that these guys are top educators?
Yeah, I haven't talked about this in a while. Our thing is we really want to make sure that the client or the prospect is who they say they are. I want to make sure that they have the business that they say they talk about. So, I mean, usually I can tell when someone's lying, right? But the biggest thing for me is that the client still does what they are teaching. And that's because I think if you aren't doing what you're teaching anymore, your tactics typically get outdated and what you're teaching can kind of slowly drift away in terms of reality. So, for example, if a client does Amazon FBA, are they still doing Amazon FBA? I want my client to have an Amazon FBA business because not only is that easier for us in our content system, we can actually, almost do their build in public kind of journey day to day behind the scenes content, which is much better in terms of marketing and building their brand. But the information that they're teaching is directly sourced from their own experience. And I think those two things work really hand in hand. So it's imperative to me. Every one of our clients still does what they are teaching.